Welcome back to the channel where we remember the women who once lit up the screen, the stage, and the hearts of millions. Today, we enter one of the most heartbreaking chapters of all, stories of American female child stars who died far too young. These were little girls with big talents, unforgettable faces we grew up watching, whose voices and smiles filled our childhoods with magic. Some became household names before they could even spell fame, while others had just begun to shine when their light was suddenly lost. Illness, accidents, tragedy, and sometimes even violence took them away before they could finish growing up. They weren't just actresses, they were children, dreamers, daughters. And while the world applauded them on screen, behind the scenes many were quietly struggling, carrying more than any child should ever have to. Today, we remember not just the roles they played, but the lives they never got to finish, the birthdays they never reached, the futures they never saw, and the childhoods that ended too soon. Today, we remember Anissa Jones, a young American actress who became famous as a child star and then tragically passed away far too soon at just 18 years old. Best known for playing Buffy Davis on the popular TV show Family Affair, Anissa captured hearts across America with her innocent charm and sweet personality on screen. But behind the fame and smiles was a young girl who never got the chance to grow up in peace. On August 28, 1976, Anissa was found dead in a bedroom after a party in Oceanside, California. Her death was ruled an accidental drug overdose, but the reality was heartbreaking. She had taken a deadly mix of cocaine, PCP, Quaaludes, and Seconal. The San Diego County coroner described her overdose as one of the most severe the county had ever seen. An envelope found beside her body linked one of the drugs to a doctor named Don Carlos Machos, who was later arrested for prescribing large quantities of drugs, including to minors like Anissa, in exchange for cash. Her final hours were spent in a house full of other teenagers and young adults, and while everyone else woke up, she never did. Just a few years before this, Anissa had been one of the most recognizable faces on television. She was born in West Lafayette, Indiana, in 1958, and her family moved to California when she was young. Her parents divorced when she was just a child, and soon after, she began acting. At the age of 8, she was cast as Buffy in Family Affair, where she played a sweet little girl living with her siblings and their bachelor uncle after their parents died. The show ran for 5 years and made her a household name, but when it ended in 1971, so did her acting career. She tried to find more work, but was constantly rejected, and by the time she was 12, Hollywood had completely forgotten her. That rejection hurt deeply, and Anissa began to drift. She still lived in California, had a boyfriend, and tried to live a normal life, but she was clearly struggling inside. She'd once said she was glad not to have been cast in The Exorcist, because people would just think Buffy was possessed. A sad, quiet comment that showed how trapped she felt by her childhood fame. Her short life was filled with bright lights at first, but those lights faded fast, leaving behind a teenager with no direction, too much pain, and easy access to drugs. Her ashes were scattered in the Pacific Ocean after a small, private funeral. Not long after, her brother Paul also died of a drug overdose. There's something especially heartbreaking about child stars like Anissa, kids who were loved by millions but forgotten when the camera stopped rolling. She didn't just die from drugs, she died from a system that used her, discarded her, and never helped her heal. Even today, fans remember her as Buffy, the sweet little girl with the Mrs. Beasley doll. But behind those eyes was a lonely young woman who needed love, not fame. Ashleigh Aston Moore, a young actress whose light burned brightly in childhood, but was tragically gone far too soon. Ashleigh, born Ashley McMillan in 1981 and raised in Vancouver by her devoted mother, was just 26 when she passed away in December 2007 under heartbreaking circumstances. While some early reports claimed her death was due to an accidental heroin overdose, it was later revealed that complications from pneumonia and bronchitis ultimately took her life. In her final days, Ashleigh had quietly withdrawn from the spotlight, staying in her hometown, far from the glitz of Hollywood, where she once showed so much promise. It's believed that behind the scenes, she was struggling with her health and the emotional weight of a life that had seen both early fame and deep personal battles. Ashleigh's journey began when she was just 6 years old, encouraged by a schoolteacher who noticed her dramatic spark. Her first job was dressing up in a chicken costume for a commercial, but she quickly moved into bigger roles, including the popular Canadian show The Odyssey, where she played dual characters and won a YTV Achievement Award. She became widely recognized in 1995 for her unforgettable role as young Chrissy in Now and Then, where she shared the screen with stars like Demi Moore, Thora Birch, and Rosie O'Donnell. To play Chrissy, Ashleigh was asked to gain 20 pounds at just 12 years old, a request that left her with deep, lasting self-image issues. Her character was often the target of cruel jokes in the film, and though it was just acting, the impact on her young heart was very real. That role, while iconic, marked the start of a complex relationship with her body and her place in the world. After a few more roles, including Gold Diggers, The Secret of Bear Mountain, and Touched by an Angel, she quietly stepped away from acting after 1997, choosing to stay close to her family in British Columbia. The fame that once brought her recognition eventually faded, but the emotional toll of childhood stardom never quite left her. Ashleigh's passing came as a shock to many who remembered her as the sweet, wide-eyed girl from Now and Then. She had once dreamed of a long career, supported by a mother who tutored her at home and encouraged her dreams. But life didn't unfold that way. Instead, Ashleigh's story became one of quiet pain behind a smile, a gifted girl who captured hearts on screen but struggled with the heavy weight of expectations off-screen. Her death is a painful reminder of how fame at a young age can leave deep scars. She may be gone, but Ashleigh Aston Moore's memory lives on through her films, her fans, and the gentle, vulnerable truth she brought to every role she played. Bridgette Andersen, a brilliant young actress whose life was filled with promise but ended far too soon in heartbreak. Bridgette was just 21 years old when she tragically passed away on May 18, 1997, in Hollywood, California, from an accidental overdose of heroin and alcohol. In her final days, she was struggling hard to stay clean, working at a health food store, and trying to distance herself from friends who were still deep into drug use. Her roommate later said she was doing her best to recover, but addiction had its grip on her. Sometime during the week before her death, Bridgette overdosed while a friend was present, and though help was called and she was rushed to Queen of Angels Hospital, it was too late. She was placed on life support but never woke up, and days later, her family made the painful decision to let her go. Her death was ruled accidental, and it devastated those who had once seen her light up screens with joy and innocence. Bridgette's story began in Inglewood, California, born on July 11, 1975, and raised in Malibu. Even as a toddler, she showed signs of genius, reading books by Ernest Hemingway by age 6 and speaking with maturity beyond her years. She once kissed her fingers and touched digital clocks whenever they read 7-Eleven, calling it her lucky time. Her acting journey began when she declared to her father at 2 years old, "I'm an actress, you know." And by age 7, she had captured hearts as Savannah in the 1982 movie Savannah Smiles, a role that would define her legacy. That same year, she portrayed a young Mae West and soon became a familiar face on television, starring in shows like Remington Steele, Family Ties, and The Mississippi. She earned multiple Youth in Film Award nominations and had the kind of spark directors dream of. She picked up tap dancing by watching Gene Kelly and learned sign language for a film role. She was that dedicated. But as childhood faded, so did the roles. Her teen years were quieter, marked by a growing distance from her family and increasing struggles with drugs. The fame and pressure that came with being a child star likely played a part in her spiral. By the time she died, she was largely out of the spotlight, though still remembered by fans who adored her innocent charm. Her ashes were scattered at Zuma Beach, not far from where she grew up, and her name still brings a soft ache to those who remember the little girl who once wanted nothing more than to make people smile. Bridgette Andersen's life was short, but her story remains a haunting reminder of the pain that often hides behind fame, and the fragile beauty of a young life lost too soon. Dana Plato, a once bright American television star whose life ended in heartbreak and loneliness. Dana, best known for playing Kimberly Drummond on the hit sitcom Different Strokes, passed away on May 8, 1999, at just 34 years old from a lethal mix of prescription drugs, hydrocodone and carisoprodol, inside a Winnebago motorhome parked outside her fiance's mother's home in Moore, Oklahoma. What seemed at first like a tragic accident was later ruled a suicide, a final chapter in a life filled with silent pain, addiction, and public struggle. Just one day earlier, Dana had appeared on The Howard Stern Show, where she was taunted by callers about her past, her sobriety, and her fading career. She sounded defensive, broken, and desperate to prove that she was clean. She even offered to take a drug test on air. Behind the words was someone barely holding on. That night, she told her fans she wasn't feeling well and took some painkillers for her recent wisdom tooth surgery. She laid down in the RV and never woke up. Dana had battled addiction and personal demons for years. She was arrested in 1991 for robbing a video store with a pellet gun and again in 1992 for forging a Valium prescription. Each time, she was humiliated in the press, labeled as a fallen child star instead of someone clearly crying out for help. Born Dana Michelle Strain on November 7, 1964, in California, she was adopted as a baby and raised in the San Fernando Valley. Her childhood was strict and isolated. Her mother kept her in what Dana once called a plastic bubble, trying to shield her from the world, but unknowingly leaving her unprepared for real life. By age 7, Dana had appeared in over 100 commercials, and at 13, she was offered a choice: pursue Olympic figure skating or take the role of Kimberly Drummond. She chose acting, and fame followed fast. Different Strokes made her a teen idol, but behind the scenes, fame came with heavy pressure, and she began using drugs and alcohol at a young age. When she became pregnant in 1984, the show dropped her. That same year, she married rocker Lanny Lambert and had a son, Tyler, but the happiness didn't last. Her mother died in 1988. Her marriage ended, and she lost custody of her son. Then her financial advisor stole nearly all of her money and disappeared. The years that followed were filled with low-budget films, failed comebacks, drug struggles, and heartbreak. At one point, she worked as a dry cleaning cashier to survive. She tried everything to start over, posing in Playboy, appearing in video games, even moving into an RV with her fiance. But her demons never left. Dana Plato died chasing hope, longing for a second chance that never came. And heartbreak followed her even in death. Her only child, Tyler, died by suicide in 2010 at age 25, unable to escape the weight of losing his mother. Dana's life was a story of childhood fame, public downfall, and quiet suffering. She was more than a headline. She was a woman who needed help, who wanted to be loved, and who was failed by those around her. Today, we don't just remember her for her role on TV, but for the real person behind the camera, one who shined bright for a moment and left this world far too soon. Dominique Dunne, a young and rising American actress whose life was stolen far too soon in one of the most heartbreaking tragedies Hollywood has ever seen. At just 22 years old, Dominique had already captured attention with her role as Dana Freeling in the hit horror movie Poltergeist, and was on the edge of what should have been a bright, long career. But on October 30th, 1982, she was attacked outside her West Hollywood home by her ex-boyfriend, John Sweeney, a chef she had broken up with after months of escalating abuse. That night, Sweeney showed up uninvited while Dominique was rehearsing lines with a friend. She stepped outside to talk to him, and minutes later, she was being strangled in her own driveway. Her friend called the police as it happened, but it was too late. Dominique was already unconscious. She never woke up. After 5 days in a coma, on November 4th, her parents made the devastating decision to take her off life support. The official cause of death was brain death from lack of oxygen. Her killer confessed at the scene and even told police he couldn't believe what he had done. But instead of a life sentence, he served less than 3 years behind bars. The injustice of her death haunted her family and shook the public. Dominique had been born in Santa Monica in 1959 to a well-known Hollywood family. Her father was the writer and producer Dominique Dunne. Her brother Griffin became an actor, and her uncle was the novelist John Gregory Dunne. She was raised around creativity and talent, studied acting seriously, and had just begun landing meaningful roles in television and film. She appeared in shows like Family, Lou Grant, and Breaking Away before landing her breakout role in Poltergeist. Her career was just starting. She was even filming the miniseries V when she was killed, and that show later aired with a dedication in her honor. What makes Dominique's death even harder to accept is that she tried to leave the abusive relationship. She had moved out, warned her mother about Sweeney, and had endured violent incidents in the weeks leading up to the attack. She showed courage in walking away, but in the end, it wasn't enough to protect her. After her death, her parents and brothers kept her memory alive through activism and writing. Her mother helped found Justice for homicide victims, and her father became a respected crime journalist, using Dominique's story to shed light on the failures of the legal system. Even decades later, the pain of her loss is felt deeply by those who loved her and by audiences who remember her brief but powerful presence on screen. Dominique Dunne wasn't just an actress. She was a daughter, a sister, and a victim of something no one should ever have to go through. Her story is a painful reminder of how dangerous domestic violence can be, and how fragile life is, even for someone who seemed to have it all ahead of her. Heather O'Rourke, the sweet-faced American child actress whose bright future was taken far too soon in one of the saddest tragedies in Hollywood. Heather was just 12 years old when she died suddenly on February 1, 1988, from congenital intestinal stenosis complicated by septic shock, a condition no one even knew she had until it was too late. Her death stunned the world because she had looked healthy, happy, and full of life until the very end. It all started in early 1987 when Heather began to experience stomach issues and was diagnosed with Crohn's disease after becoming ill from contaminated well water. She quietly endured painful treatments and took cortisone injections that caused her face to swell. Yet she never once let it interfere with her work or spirit, continuing to film Poltergeist 3 without a single complaint. But her body was hiding something far more serious. On the morning of February 1st, she collapsed at home after struggling to eat breakfast, her lips blue and hands cold. Her mother rushed to call for help, and Heather, still trying to stay strong, told the paramedics she was really okay and worried more about missing school than her own health. But in the ambulance, her heart stopped. Doctors restarted it, performed emergency surgery to fix a blockage in her intestines. But tragically, she went into cardiac arrest again in recovery, and this time they couldn't bring her back. The entire medical team fought for over half an hour, but she was pronounced dead that afternoon, leaving her family, friends, and fans heartbroken. Heather had become famous almost overnight after being discovered by Steven Spielberg at just 5 years old, when he spotted her eating lunch at MGM Studios and cast her as Carol Ann in the horror film Poltergeist. Her iconic line, "They're here," became part of pop culture history, and she quickly became one of the most recognizable child stars of the 1980s. She lit up the screen with her wide eyes, blonde hair, and natural innocence, returning for 2 more Poltergeist films and appearing in hit shows like Happy Days, Webster, and Chips. Despite all the fame, Heather stayed grounded, a 5th grade class president who loved Disneyland and her family. Her sudden death not only devastated fans, but also added to the chilling reputation of the so-called Poltergeist curse, as hers was one of several eerie deaths linked to the movie's cast. But beyond the rumors and myths, Heather's story is about a little girl who gave so much joy in such a short time, who worked hard, stayed kind, and smiled through pain no child should ever have to bear. Her passing wasn't just a loss to Hollywood, it was a loss to everyone who saw in her a spark of magic, and a reminder of how fragile life can be, even for someone so young and full of promise. Judith Barcy, a 10-year-old American child actress whose short life and heartbreaking death still shake anyone who hears her story. Judith had a bright future, a voice millions recognized, and a spirit that lit up every room she walked into. But none of that was enough to protect her from the danger that lived inside her own home. On July 27, 1988, Judith was shot to death in her bed by her father, Joseph Barcy, who also murdered her mother, Maria, before setting their bodies on fire and killing himself in the garage. Judith had spent her final months living in constant fear. Her father was a deeply troubled man, a violent alcoholic who threatened to kill them both for years. Even as her acting career soared, with major roles like Ducky in The Land Before Time and Anne-Marie in All Dogs Go to Heaven, Judith's home life was filled with terror. She had started showing signs of emotional trauma, pulling out her eyelashes and whispering to friends that she was afraid to go home because she knew her dad wanted to kill her mother. Her mom had tried to get help, even rented an apartment as a way out, but fear and hope that things might get better kept her from leaving for good. That hesitation cost both of them their lives. Judith was born on June 6, 1978, in Los Angeles to Hungarian immigrant parents who had each escaped difficult lives in search of something better. From the age of 5, Maria encouraged Judith's acting talents, and she quickly became one of the most successful child stars in Hollywood, appearing in over 70 commercials and several TV shows and movies. Directors praised her as a natural talent far beyond her years. Despite her fame and the income it brought her family, Judith remained a little girl who loved animals and dreamed of doing more films. Behind the scenes, though, she was suffering in silence. Her father's jealousy over her success and his own life's failures boiled into something deadly. Even a therapist had reported severe abuse to Child Protective Services, but the system failed her. And just weeks after her emotional breakdown, Judith was gone. Her final movie was released after her death, and those who worked with her said her voice brought so much life to her characters that it felt impossible to imagine she was really gone. Fans later raised money to buy her a proper gravestone, and it features her most famous line, "Yap, yap, yap," a sweet, simple reminder of the little girl behind the animated voice. But no words, not even in a movie, can undo the pain of what happened to her. Judith Barcy was not just a child actress. She was a daughter, a victim of abuse, and a name that should never be forgotten, not just because of how talented she was, but because of how tragically her life was stolen by the very person who was supposed to protect her. Michelle Thomas, a young American actress whose life ended far too soon, leaving behind a legacy of warmth, talent, and heartbreak. Michelle, best known for playing the sweet and lovable Myra Monkhouse on Family Matters, the sensitive Justine Phillips on The Cosby Show, and the aspiring singer Callie Rogers on The Young and the Restless, died on December 23, 1998, at just 30 years old after a devastating battle with a rare and aggressive form of cancer called desmoplastic small round cell tumor. It was in August 1997 when Michelle was first diagnosed. Even though she lived an extremely healthy life, she was a vegetarian, never drank or smoked, and took great care of herself. Still, cancer doesn't care who you are. In early 1998, she had surgery to remove a lemon-sized tumor and tried to carry on with her acting career, even joining The Young and the Restless. But in October of that same year, her health took a serious turn when another growth ruptured inside her, requiring emergency surgery. Michelle's body was fragile and didn't react well to medication. Even small sedatives would put her to sleep for days. After being discharged from the hospital, she went home to spend Thanksgiving with her family in Weehawken, New Jersey. She was surrounded by love, but her condition kept worsening. On December 23rd, just 2 days before Christmas, she passed away at the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York City, with her former boyfriend and close friend Malcolm Jamal Warner by her side. It was a quiet goodbye for someone who had lit up so many screens. Michelle had been a performer almost her whole life. She was born in Brookline, Massachusetts, on September 23, 1968, to Finjor Thomas, a stage actress, and Dennis D.T. Thomas, a founding member of Kool and the Gang. Her childhood was filled with music, acting, and theater, often attending rehearsals with her mother and learning the craft from her. She won the title of Miss Talented Teen International at 15, and from there her journey as a rising star began. Through the late 80s and 90s, she appeared in commercials, TV shows, music videos, and even on stage, always playing roles that made people feel something, whether it was laughter, love, or sympathy. Her time as Myra on Family Matters made her unforgettable to millions of viewers. And just before her illness worsened, she had even been nominated for an NAACP Image Award for her work on The Young and the Restless. But behind the smiles and the bright career, Michelle was quietly fighting a disease that took everything from her in less than 2 years. She was buried in New Jersey after a Muslim funeral service, as per her wishes. Today, we don't just remember an actress. We remember a daughter, a friend, a joyful soul, and a woman who gave everything she had to her work and her loved ones, even while knowing her time was short. Her death was not just a medical loss. It was an emotional one for anyone who ever saw her light up a screen. Dana Hill, the American actress whose sweet, childlike voice and powerful performances touched millions, but whose life was painfully short. Dana was only 32 when she passed away on July 15, 1996, after slipping into a diabetic coma in May and then suffering a paralytic stroke in June. Her body had grown weaker over the years due to complications from type 1 diabetes, a disease she was diagnosed with as a child after collapsing during a race. The final months of her life were heartbreaking. Her kidneys were failing. She was in and out of the hospital, and in her last weeks, she could only communicate by blinking. Her mother later said that when Dana finally passed, it felt like her soul had been freed from a broken body that had held her back for so long. Born Dana Lynn Getz in Los Angeles on May 6, 1964. Dana had dreams of becoming an athlete before diabetes stole that future from her. But she didn't give up. She turned to acting instead, using her mother's maiden name to make her own name in the industry. Her illness stunted her growth, giving her a youthful look and voice that helped her play children well into adulthood. She became famous in the early 80s with heartbreaking roles like the 12-year-old victim in Fallen Angel, which won her a Young Artist Award. She starred in Shoot the Moon, Cross Creek, and took on the role of Audrey in National Lampoon's European Vacation. But as her health declined, Dana focused more on voice acting, leaving behind a legacy in beloved shows like Goof Troop, where she voiced Max Goof, Duckman, Tom and Jerry, the movie Darkwing Duck, and many others. Her voice became part of childhood for an entire generation. Despite her illness, Dana never stopped working, never stopped trying, and never let the world see how much she was suffering. Her ability to bring young characters to life came from a place of deep pain and strength. In a life full of battles, she gave everything she had to her craft, even when her body was slowly giving out. Her death wasn't just the loss of a talented actress. It was the end of a life that had fought hard and loved fiercely through every obstacle. Dana Hill's story is a reminder of how fragile life can be, and how someone so full of life on screen can be hurting so deeply behind it. She will never be forgotten. Today, we remember the heartbreaking and senseless loss of one of the brightest stars in Latin music history, Selena Quintanilla Perez, the queen of Tejano music, who was tragically murdered at just 23 years old. Selena was at the height of her career, admired not just for her unforgettable voice and stage presence, but also for the love and warmth she brought to everyone around her. But behind the fame, her final days were shadowed by betrayal from someone she trusted deeply, Yolanda Saldivar, the woman who once called herself Selena's biggest fan and managed both her fan club and boutique business. In the months leading up to March 1995, serious concerns began to emerge regarding Saldivar's erratic behavior, mishandling of employees, and financial discrepancies, with accusations of embezzling over $30,000 from the fan club and boutiques. Selena's father tried to intervene, warning her to stay away from Saldivar. But Selena, believing she was essential to her business and still clinging to their friendship, chose to handle things privately. On the morning of March 31, 1995, Selena met with Saldivar at a Days Inn motel in Corpus Christi, hoping to retrieve important financial documents. Just moments after confronting her, Saldivar pulled a revolver from her purse and shot Selena in the back. The bullet severed her subclavian artery, causing massive internal bleeding. Despite being gravely injured, Selena managed to run nearly 400 feet toward the hotel lobby, leaving a trail of blood before collapsing. With her last breaths, she identified her killer. Paramedics rushed her to Corpus Christi Memorial Hospital, where doctors fought to save her life with blood transfusions and open chest surgery. But the damage was irreversible. At 1:05 p.m., she was pronounced dead from blood loss and cardiac arrest. Her autopsy revealed just how fatal the single bullet had been, and the entire country, especially the Latino community, was shaken to its core. Her killer was arrested after a 9-hour standoff and is now serving a life sentence. Selena's death wasn't just a tragic end to a promising life. It was a cultural wound that still aches decades later. She had become a beacon of representation for Mexican Americans and a powerful female figure in a male-dominated music genre. From singing in her family band Selena y Los Dinos as a child, to winning a Grammy, launching a fashion empire, and topping charts with songs like Como la Flor and Amor Prohibido, Selena had achieved more by 23 than many do in a lifetime. Born in Lake Jackson, Texas, she had a magnetic presence that crossed cultural boundaries, singing in both English and Spanish, inspiring generations with her passion and authenticity. Her posthumous album Dreaming of You made history by debuting at #1 on the Billboard 200, and her life story was immortalized in the 1997 film Selena, starring Jennifer Lopez. But no award, no film, and no tribute can erase the pain of losing her so violently and so young. Selena was more than a superstar. She was a daughter, a wife, a friend, and a symbol of pride for millions. Her light was stolen far too soon by someone she trusted, and the world will never forget the sorrow of that day. Skye McCole Bertusiak, a talented American actress whose life ended far too soon at just 21 years old, leaving behind a story full of heartbreak, struggle, and unrealized dreams. On July 19, 2014, Skye was found sitting up in her bed by her boyfriend in the garage apartment behind her parents' Houston home. Unresponsive, her heart no longer beating. Her mother, Helen, rushed in and tried CPR, something she heartbreakingly admitted she had done before when Skye suffered from seizures. Paramedics arrived and worked on her for 45 minutes, but nothing could bring her back. Though her mother believed a seizure had taken her life. Skye had battled epilepsy on and off since she was a baby. The official cause was later revealed as an accidental overdose from a deadly mix of hydrocodone, a strong painkiller, difluoroethane, a chemical often used to get high, and carisoprodol, a muscle relaxant. Her family had no idea she was using anything dangerous, and Helen insisted Skye had been healthy and wasn't involved in drugs. But the seizures had recently returned, and it's likely that a seizure led to her choking while alone. She was planning to direct her first film, had dreams that stretched far beyond the quiet apartment she passed away in. And yet in the end, she died alone, her body giving up after years of silent struggle. Born on September 28, 1992 in Houston, Skye grew up in a loving home and started acting young. Her first big role was in The Patriot, where she played Mel Gibson's youngest daughter and moved audiences to tears with her quiet, emotional performance. She quickly became known for playing intense, emotional roles beyond her years, appearing in Don't Say a Word as Michael Douglas's daughter, in the Cider House Rules, Boogeyman, and in the TV show 24 as Megan Matheson. She also starred in several made-for-TV films, voiceovers, and stage plays like The Miracle Worker. Behind the camera, she was smart, kind, and full of energy, someone who could light up a room and make everyone laugh. But behind her smile was a girl who had lived with health issues most of her life, including seizures that terrified her family and would eventually return to haunt her final days. Her mother called her beautiful and kind, and her brother, who spoke at her memorial, simply asked people to plant a tree in her memory, a symbol of life and peace for someone whose own life ended so suddenly. Skye's death was not just a medical tragedy, it was the loss of a young woman who had so much more to give, someone whose talent made her unforgettable, but whose pain was mostly kept private. In the end, the girl who once played strong daughters and broken children on screen died a heartbreaking death that even the best scripts could never capture. Skye McCole Bertusiak will always be remembered for the light she brought to the screen, and the deep sadness of how quickly that light was taken away. Lisa Left Eye Lopez, the fiery and fearless voice of TLC, whose life was tragically cut short on April 25, 2002, in a devastating car crash in Honduras. She was just 30. Lisa was driving a rented SUV during a spiritual retreat when she swerved suddenly to avoid an oncoming car and lost control, causing the vehicle to flip several times before crashing. She wasn't wearing a seatbelt and was thrown from the car, dying instantly from a fractured skull while 7 others survived. Just weeks before her death, Lisa had cradled a dying young boy in her arms after another car accident involving her assistant, and she became haunted by the eerie feeling that a spirit had mistakenly taken the child instead of her. She had been filming a documentary at the time, searching for healing and peace, but that search ended in heartbreak. Born in Philadelphia in 1971, Lisa grew up in a strict, often abusive home, but music gave her an escape. She was just 5 when she started writing songs and performing with her siblings, and by the time she joined TLC in the early 90s, her creative spark and honesty made her unforgettable. Lisa wasn't just the rapper of TLC, she was the visionary, designing their stage looks, shaping their music, and speaking her truth without fear. With hits like Waterfalls and No Scrubs, TLC became one of the biggest girl groups in the world, winning 4 Grammys, selling millions, and empowering a generation. But Lisa's personal life was often chaotic. Her stormy relationship with NFL star Andre Risson turned explosive in 1994 when, after years of abuse, she set his sneakers on fire, a moment that accidentally burned down his mansion and followed her forever. She struggled with self-harm, alcohol, and feelings of being misunderstood, yet she kept pushing forward. Even near the end, she was seeking something deeper, traveling to Honduras often, helping local children, and trying to understand her place in the world. The footage from her final days shows a woman who seemed to sense her time was near. Lisa once said she believed death wasn't the end, just a transformation of energy, and maybe that's why she wasn't afraid. Her death broke hearts around the world, especially those of her TLC sisters who saw her as family, even through disagreements. Thousands attended her funeral, and the words engraved on her casket came from her verse in Waterfalls. Dreams are hopeless aspirations. In hopes of coming true, believe in yourself. The rest is up to me and you. Lisa's story was wild, painful, beautiful, and unforgettable, just like her. Tara Coria McCullen, a young American actress whose life was tragically cut short at just 16 years old. Known to many for playing Graciela Reyes, a gang member on the TV drama Judging Amy, Tara's real life ended in a way that heartbreakingly mirrored the role she portrayed on screen. On the evening of October 21, 2005, while standing outside her apartment in Inglewood, California, Tara was shot multiple times by a gang member named Damien Woods. She had tried to run inside for safety, but the bullet struck her in the torso, and though she was rushed to the hospital, she died a few hours later. 2 other people were also injured in the attack but survived. Authorities later said she wasn't officially part of a gang, but may have simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time. What makes it all the more tragic is that Tara had recently moved into her own apartment and had started dating a gang member 10 years older than her, someone who may have unintentionally pulled her closer to danger. The man who killed her, Watts, was later convicted of her murder and sentenced to life without parole for multiple shootings over a 2-day spree. Tara's death shocked not just the entertainment industry, but her school, her family, and anyone who knew her as the bright, talented girl from Venice High School who loved to sing in the choir and had no prior acting experience before landing a movie role in Rebound and a recurring part on national television. She stood out for her warmth and her ability to connect with anyone, no matter who they were. Her parents described her as someone full of energy, someone who could light up a room, and someone who made friends with everyone, from crew members to fellow actors, without judgment. Her rise in Hollywood was quick, promising, and sadly, far too short. Tara's story is not just about fame or talent, but about a life full of hope that was stolen far too soon by violence she didn't deserve. She had just begun to build a future for herself, but in one moment, it was all gone. Now, nearly 20 years later, her name lives on not only through her work, but also as a painful reminder of how fast a young life can be taken, and how some of the most talented souls never get the time to show the world everything they were capable of becoming. Brittany Murphy, a vibrant and talented American actress and singer whose life ended far too soon under deeply heartbreaking circumstances. On the morning of December 20, 2009, Brittany collapsed in the bathroom of her Los Angeles home. Her mother, Sharon, heard her cry out, "Mommy, I can't catch my breath. Help me." And within hours, Britney was gone. She died at just 32 years old at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center after going into cardiac arrest, leaving behind a storm of grief and unanswered questions. The official cause of death was severe pneumonia, worsened by extreme iron deficiency anemia and multiple medications she had been taking, both over-the-counter and prescription, to treat flu-like symptoms she'd been struggling with for weeks. What makes it even sadder is how treatable her condition could have been if only she had gotten proper medical care in time. Her final days were filled with weakness, shortness of breath, and worsening illness. But despite clearly being very sick, she stayed home, trying to recover quietly, unaware her body was shutting down. An autopsy revealed she was dangerously anemic, so much so that if doctors had seen her blood work even a week before, she might have been rushed into emergency treatment that could have saved her. The medications found in her system weren't illegal or abusive, but in her fragile state, they became too much for her body to handle. Her husband, Simon Monjack, and her mother denied drug abuse, suggesting instead a heart condition or possibly even toxic mold in their home, though later investigations left those theories unproven. Strangely and tragically, just 5 months later, Simon also died in the same house from the same causes, pneumonia and anemia, raising even more questions that only deepened the sadness around Britney's death. But long before her final days, Britney was a force of talent and energy. Born in Atlanta on November 10, 1977, she was raised by her mother in New Jersey, where money was tight and life was tough. She often ate spaghetti every night, and sometimes begged for clothes at Kmart. Still, her mom believed in her dream so deeply that she sold everything to move with her to Los Angeles when Britney was just a teenager. That leap of faith paid off when Britney broke through as the sweet and awkward Ty in Clueless in 1995. From there, she built a career full of range and heart, taking on dramatic roles in Girl, Interrupted, and 8 Mile, and lighting up comedies like Uptown Girls and Just Married. She also voiced the beloved Luann Platter on King of the Hill for over a decade, and even released a chart-topping dance track in 2006. But behind her smile, Britney struggled silently with body image issues, intense pressure in Hollywood, and eventually serious health problems. Despite her efforts to stay strong and push through, her body couldn't hold on. Her last words, according to her husband, were, "Mom, I'm dying, I love you." And they echo now as a heartbreaking reminder of how fragile and overlooked her condition truly was. Britney Murphy was more than the roles she played. She was a bright, caring, and passionate woman who gave everything to her craft and was taken far too soon. Her story is one of talent, struggle, and tragedy, and it leaves behind a legacy that still touches fans all over the world. J. Madison Wright Morris, a former American child actress whose life was full of promise, talent, and heartbreaking tragedy. Born on July 29, 1984, in Cincinnati, Ohio, Madison was raised in Kentucky and began modeling at the age of 5, later moving with her family to Los Angeles to pursue acting. Her breakout role came at just 10 years old as True Danziger in the sci-fi series Earth 2, and she soon appeared in other notable roles, including an emotional part in where she played a dying child, and the family film Shiloh alongside her younger sister. But behind the bright lights and early fame, Madison's real-life battle began in her teens when she was diagnosed with restrictive cardiomyopathy, a severe disease that damages the heart muscle. At just 15, after repeated illness and long hospital stays, she received a life-saving heart transplant at the Cleveland Clinic in 2000, a moment of hope after years of fear. Actor Clancy Brown, who once played her on-screen father, even led efforts to help cover her medical costs and gifted her a laptop, offering kindness during the darkest times. Despite the odds, Madison didn't give up. She left Hollywood, returned to Kentucky, and focused on her education, eventually earning a degree in English and her teaching credentials. She spent her time speaking to others about the importance of organ donation, using her own story to inspire. But just when it seemed her life was finally coming together, she had just married Brent Morris, a medical student. On July 8, 2006, tragedy struck again. One day after returning from their honeymoon in Hawaii, Madison suffered a massive heart attack and was rushed to the hospital. Despite all she had fought through, her heart couldn't take it. She died on July 21, 2006, only 2 weeks after her wedding and just 8 days before her 22nd birthday. She had been preparing to start her first job as a high school English teacher that fall. Her funeral was held at the same church where she had just gotten married. Madison's story is devastating not just because of how young she was, but because she had overcome so much and was finally ready to start a new chapter. Her life was short but powerful, and she will always be remembered as a talented actress, a fighter, and a young woman whose heart carried both joy and pain until the very end. Lucille Rickson, a young American actress who rose to fame during the silent film era, but whose life ended far too soon. Lucille, born Ingeborg Myrtle Elizabeth Erickson in Chicago on August 22, 1910, became one of Hollywood's brightest rising stars before she even hit her teens. But behind her growing success was a life filled with pressure, exhaustion, and tragedy. Lucille was only 14 years old when she died on March 13, 1925, from complications caused by tuberculosis. But those close to her believed it wasn't just the illness that killed her. It was the relentless demands of an industry that worked her to the bone. Her story is a painful reminder of how fame can sometimes come at an unthinkable cost. As a child, Lucille was pushed into modeling and acting by her parents, especially her mother, who depended on her daughter's income. By the time she was 5, Lucille was working in films. She had barely lived a childhood of her own. Her big break came when she was chosen to star in Samuel Goldwyn's Edgar comedy series. And before long, she was being called the youngest leading lady in movies. Studios pretended she was 16 to justify casting her in adult roles when in reality, she was only 13. In 1924 alone, she completed 10 films, one after another, without rest. That year, while working on The Galloping Fish, she collapsed and was later diagnosed with tuberculosis. Her body and spirit simply couldn't keep up anymore. Her health quickly declined, and her final months were spent bedridden, cared for by her devoted mother, Ingeborg, who never left her side. But even that love came with its own burden. Her mother, overwhelmed by grief and stress, suffered a sudden heart attack while attending to Lucille, dying right beside her daughter. Just 2 weeks later, Lucille followed her into death. It was said that during one of her last moments, Lucille tried to hold on, whispering through tears that her mother believed in her, that she still had a future, that she wasn't supposed to die. That kind of hope from a dying 14-year-old is enough to break anyone's heart. Some even whispered that her death wasn't from tuberculosis alone, but possibly from a secret abortion, rumors that only added more sorrow to an already tragic ending. Lucille's body was cremated and buried alongside her mother at Forest Lawn in Glendale. She was just a child who wanted to act, who smiled for the cameras and lit up the screen, but who paid the ultimate price for a dream that was never really hers alone. Her last film, The Denial, came out 10 days after her death, like one final goodbye. Lucille Rickson should have had a long life filled with memories, not just movie roles. Instead, she became a symbol of how the weight of fame can crush even the most innocent. Dorothy Dell, a rising young star whose life was cut tragically short at just 19 years old. Dorothy Dell, born Dorothy Dell Goff, was a talented American film actress who seemed to have everything ahead of her. A blossoming Hollywood career, beauty pageant crowns, and a love story that was just beginning. But on the early morning of June 8, 1934, everything came to a devastating end when the car she was riding in spun out of control after a party in Altadena, California. The driver, 38-year-old Dr. Carl Wagner, a Pasadena surgeon, was speeding down a winding road when he missed a curve, crashing the car into a boulder, then a telephone pole, and finally a palm tree. The vehicle rolled over and over, ending up in a crumpled heap. Dorothy was pinned under the wreckage and killed instantly. Dr. Wagner was thrown from the car and died hours later in the hospital. Just days before her death, Dorothy had mentioned the old superstition about celebrities dying in threes. She wondered aloud who might be next after the recent deaths of Lou Cody and Lillian Tashman. No one imagined it would be her. Her sudden death stunned Hollywood. especially as she had just wrapped filming for Shoot the Works and was being seen as Paramount's next big star. Dorothy had already won hearts with her role in Little Miss Marker alongside Shirley Temple, and her performance in Wharf Angel earned her glowing reviews. She was more than just a pretty face. She had real charm, a powerful voice, and a sense of humor that lit up the screen. Born in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, in 1915, Dorothy was winning beauty contests before she could even talk, named the most beautiful baby in her town at just 13 months. Her family moved to New Orleans when she was a child, and by 17 she had already won Miss New Orleans, and then the title of Miss Universe at the International Pageant of Pulchritude. Determined to help her best friend Dorothy Lamour succeed, she turned down better offers to perform in vaudeville. She later made it to New York, joining the Ziegfeld Follies and making a name for herself on Broadway. Her personal life was full of ups and downs. She had a brief romance with singer Russ Colombo and was reportedly engaged to caricaturist Nat Carson, who had just proposed from London shortly before she died. Dorothy had faced death before: a dog attack as a child, a yacht explosion she narrowly avoided, a serious car crash in 1931 that left her hospitalized for months, and even a broken leg while performing. But none of that prepared anyone for the final, fatal accident that took her away. She was a young woman full of life, promise, and talent, and Hollywood never got the chance to see how far she could have gone. Her tragic death not only ended a life, but left a silence where a brilliant future had once been. She was laid to rest in Metairie Cemetery in New Orleans, where her story began, and where it came to a sudden, sorrowful end. Sammy Kane Kraft, a young woman whose talent, heart, and light were taken far too soon in a tragic accident that still haunts those who knew and loved her. Sammy was just 20 years old when she lost her life on October 9, 2012, in a devastating car crash on the Santa Monica Freeway in Los Angeles. She was riding in the passenger seat of an Audi when it slammed into the back of a semi-truck and was then hit by another vehicle. The car was reportedly going at a high speed, and the driver, her 21-year-old friend Molly Adams, was later arrested on suspicion of felony drunk driving. Sammy was trapped inside the wrecked car when emergency responders arrived and was rushed to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, where she was pronounced dead. She didn't make it. Her death was shocking, sudden, and completely preventable, and it left a hole in the lives of her family, friends, and fans that could never be filled. Her heart was donated to Yvonne Payne, wife of TV personality Charles Payne, a final act of giving from someone who still had so much more to give. Sammy was born on April 2, 1992, in Livingston, New Jersey, and even as a child, it was clear she was different, gifted, driven, and full of spirit. She was a natural athlete, a star baseball player with a fastball that could hit 75 miles per hour. At just 13, she was discovered on a baseball field in Los Angeles and cast in her only acting role as Amanda Wurlitzer in the 2005 remake of Bad News Bears. She brought toughness, confidence, and charm to the role and held her own alongside seasoned actors like Billy Bob Thornton. She once said she couldn't fill Tatum O'Neal's shoes, but wanted to bring her own New York toughness to the part, and she did just that. She was the real deal, talented, fearless, and funny. Off the field and screen, Sammy had a deep love for music. She started a garage folk project in San Francisco called Scary Girls and performed in small venues, even recording music with her brother. She had recently moved back to Los Angeles and was studying at Santa Monica College, working on new creative projects. She was close with her family, loved the Yankees, and lived with a rare mix of grit and kindness. Alan Ahame, one of her closest friends, honored her by taping Sammy's initials, SKK, to her guitar and writing the third verse of the song, Hallelujah, in her memory. Sammy's life was rich with promise, with laughter, with art, and with love, but it was all taken in a single night because someone made a terrible choice. The pain of that loss will always linger. She is survived by her parents, 2 older brothers, and her grandfather. Sammy Kane Kraft wasn't just a young actress or a gifted pitcher or a singer with big dreams. She was a daughter, a sister, a best friend, a bright light, and a life that should never have ended the way it did.